Welcome to A2Council Update, a recap of the Ann Arbor City Council meeting on May 20th, 2024. This meeting included comments and discussion about final approval for rezoning properties at Riverside Drive, amendments to the snow removal ordinance, changes to council rules, issuing capital improvement bonds for the Housing Commission, and the annual budget with council amendments. This is the voting chart for the council meeting on May 20th, 2024. There were 2 split votes on amendments to the city budget. One amendment to fund improvements to pedestrian safety on Stone School Road was voted down. All other agenda items were approved. You can find this voting chart and more information about this meeting at a2council.com. Like and subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. The meeting included a presentation from Maura Thompson, Director of the Downtown Development Authority. She shared an update about the parking structures and bike lanes downtown.
On June 2nd, which is the first Sunday in June, you will see gate arms down at all of our facilities. Parking patrons will have to pull a ticket to enter and insert a ticket to exit. Parking will remain free. We've also been working with Supportive Connections to get Narcan dispensers in 4 of our parking facilities. We will be replacing all of the rooftop fencing on structures this year. Our engineers recently determined that we'll also be able to add a curved element to some of the fencing in some locations. So similar to what you have, or what I'm showing here on the screen. Happy to report that our bike counters, the public-facing web page, is now live and up and running. We have counters on William Street, Division, and Miller Catherine. DDA staff have been working on creating a public art and placemaking program. The goal of the program is to just enhance the downtown experience for all people and really to bring joy, more joy, to our public spaces.
After introductory remarks, public comments, and staff explanations, Council discussed agenda items for less than 2 hours. 10 people signed up in advance to offer public comments. 7 people spoke to topics on the agenda. The consent agenda this week included 11 items and no expenditures. Nothing was pulled for discussion. The consent agenda was approved unanimously. Council considered final approval for an annexation and rezoning of properties at Riverside Drive. The parcels were previously township islands. The owner requested annexation and city zoning of R1A. City staff recommended that these parcels be zoned R1B. Both the original request for R1A, allowing 1 home, and staff recommendation of R1B, which would have allowed 3 homes, were set aside by the City Planning Commission. Councilmember Lisa Dish offered a brief introduction.
R1B requires a 10,000 square foot lot minimum. And so if we rezone to that, the max that could be achieved would be 3 houses on this 0.74 acres. The land use plan calls for single and 2-family residential uses for this site. So it would not be inconsistent with a rezoning to R1D, which is what the Planning Commission recommends.
City staff recommended R1B zoning for these parcels, explaining that this zoning was consistent with the land use plan. Staff recommended further that the R1B zoning provided opportunity for more comprehensive planning in the future. Council unanimously approved R1D zoning, setting aside the recommendation of city staff. Council then considered an amendment to the city ordinance requiring that property owners remove snow on sidewalks adjacent to their properties. A city attorney introduced the changes.
Under the proposed ordinance, it would be a ticket for one kind of zoning district, which would be R1, 2, or 3, which are single-family, duplex, or townhouse, or something other than that, either commercial or R4, which is like apartment buildings, apartment complexes. So the bias would be if you've got more property, if you're in a commercial district, you're going to get a bigger ticket. So that's done based on those are in commercial districts and there's, more sidewalk to plow, they get more use.
Amendments also add clarification that registered agents will be responsible for snow removal at Airbnb and other rental properties in residential districts. After a brief discussion, the ordinance amendments were approved unanimously at first reading. At a future meeting, they will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Council then considered amendments to the council rules. Changes will allow the city administrator to add items to the agenda. He will have discretion in choosing whether or not to share the fiscal impact of resolutions and ordinances. Resolution and ordinance proposals that come from individual council members will be subject to a 30-day delay so that the city administrator or city attorney may review any administrative or fiscal impacts. Other changes will allow electronic communication on personal matters during council meetings. Speaking times for public commenters will be reduced when more than 30 people sign up. Earlier in the evening, a public commenter spoke to the issue.
There's a couple things in this batch of rules changes that are super offensive. Number one, if 30 people show up, you're going to reduce their time to 2 minutes each instead of 3 minutes. So however you want to couch that in your speeches, that's basically saying the more important something is to this community, the less you want to hear from each person about it. Another thing that's offensive is that now you're going to allow yourself to look at phones or electronic devices during meetings. And so now you can chat on Twitter with your rabid followers like Julie Grand used to do, or you can shop for furniture like Jen Iyer used to do. I have photos if the press wants to see them.
Council discussed the rules amendments for about 6 minutes.
An ordinance change wouldn't be introduced by a council member without first giving the city administrator the opportunity to provide feedback to us about what the budgetary impacts of that might be, and that would happen within a 30-day time period.
We are also now including kind of some additional time to ensure that all of the ordinances and resolutions that come before us have the opportunity to have a fiscal impact statement added to them.
Council unanimously approved all proposed amendments to council rules. Without discussion, Council unanimously approved the issuance of up to $9 million in capital improvement bonds. A dedicated fund will be established to receive bond proceeds, and it will be administered by the Housing Commission. Up to 5% can be used to pay administrative costs. Without discussion, Council unanimously approved fee adjustments for both the Public Services and Community Services departments of the city. Council then considered the annual budget for fiscal year 2025. Earlier in the evening, residents offered public comment.
Several meetings ago, you guys passed a thing saying, hey, City Council is still committed to providing an unarmed response program, but I haven't been seeing that backed up by action. The city has decided to turn down the $3.5 million of ARPA funding that would have funded the program for a while. And there's now nothing in the budget that I'm seeing that would fund an unarmed response program.
For the second year in a row, City Administrator Dehoney identified an extra $1 million in the budget and invited Council to allocate it however they wished. In advance of the meeting, Council members submitted amendments to the budget. The first amendment, sponsored by Council members Dish and Cornell, asked for an additional $100,000 for consultants needed to make extensive changes to zoning and land use policies.
On April 1st, we passed a suite of economic development reforms in pursuit of crucial city goals. The one-time funds provided by this amendment merely get ahead of those requests by providing funds tonight for work that we've asked them to do in pursuit of goals that Council has affirmed as high priorities.
The budget amendment was approved unanimously. A second amendment, also sponsored by Council members Dish and Cornell, asked for a little over $20,000 to fund a more experienced city planner. This planner will design and implement changes anticipated with the Comprehensive Land Use Plan, not yet completed. Councilmember Dish explained that revenue from increased development is already expected from the not yet completed Comprehensive Land Use Plan.
This amendment proposes to upgrade the third of these new positions to level 5 to better position planning staff to design and implement the many transformative ideas that I'm sure will come out of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan process. Upgrading this position will increase planning revenues in an amount equal to the cost of the upgrade.
The amendment was approved unanimously. A third amendment, sponsored by Council members Cornell, Briggs, Ghazi-Edwin, Watson, and Ackman, asked for $500,000 to fund eviction prevention and low-income youth services.
This renews funding that was allocated to the budget last year from the marijuana excise tax rebate to fund eviction prevention and low-income youth services.
The amendment was approved unanimously. A fourth amendment, sponsored by Council members Harrison and Redina, asked for $500,000 to fund the Rising Hope for Housing program.
This year, we are requesting an additional $100,000 for the marijuana excise tax revenue, bringing our total to $500,000 for this program.
The amendment was approved unanimously. A fifth amendment, sponsored by Councilmember Iyer, asked that $100,000 be spent on mailers to residents in order to direct them on how to contact their elected leaders. Earlier in the evening, public commenters spoke to this amendment.
Your first act was to quietly hide your home addresses from the public, so they still think I'm on city council. You created a situation that now you're going to pretend to solve by giving yourselves $100,000 mailing out shiny flyers touting how awesome you guys are.
You know, it's one thing when you spend your personal time and money putting out newsletters and communications, or especially in the campaign, when you spend your campaign funds or PAC money or whatever to communicate to us, couching it as equitable communication. That's progressive. I'm a longtime progressive. Don't hide behind things that you're going to say are equitable when this is just marketing for yourselves.
Councilmember Iyer introduced it, and her colleagues responded.
But the idea here is that that each council member would be able to once a year send out a small mailer to every household in their ward.
I've added my name to this because I think it's completely appropriate that part of our communications budget be allocated for us to present information in different formats.
I think that it's appropriate that we take a little bit more time to identify the details of this before we appropriate funding for it. We're not talking about communications from the city directly, written communications. We're talking about communications from city council members. Even talking about what future communications could be, there certainly could be a political component of that.
Just this past weekend, I was driving through Ward 3 and ran across a flooded street. And when we're talking to this college student, it was pretty clear they didn't know who their city council rep was. It's something you can put on your fridge. So that's what I'm imagining. So I'm in support of this.
There's senior information for seniors, information for veterans that goes out from your state legislators' offices.
When I think about this amendment, I'm thinking about how if we can restore faith and confidence in our work here.
In answer to questions, the city attorney weighed in.
I think the communication would be okay, but I cannot say for sure without looking at the actual communication. If we intended for factual information to be communicated, I think it would be safer to have it as a city communication versus a communication from the elected body. You could achieve this intent with an amendment to the amendment by making it a city staff or communications office directed communication.
Council responded.
As city council members, we are the face of the city to some of our constituents. And so what is appealing to me about what is proposed here is that there is a personal touch.
I also want to say that, Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners has something that's similar.
In a split vote, the budget amendment of $100,000 was approved to pay for city council members to send mailers to residents. A sixth amendment, sponsored by Council members Ghazi Edwin and Redina, asked for $250,000 to accelerate improvements for pedestrian safety on Stone School Road, upgrading crosswalks at Pheasant Run Circle and Birch Hollow Drive. Earlier in the evening, a public commenter spoke to the issue.
The rectangular rapid flashing beacons that have been requested by the community for Stone School Road. The community's asked for those over and over again, but we can't fund those.
City staff offered explanation of how improvements like the crosswalks on Stone School Road are assessed under a prioritization system.
We're currently working on scoring the locations based on that system. And because budgets are limited, this prioritization system will identify locations that are anticipated to have the biggest impact. And this system takes into account such factors as community support, proximity to schools, transit, and other pedestrian attractors, crash history, equity, address density, number of vehicle travel lanes, posted speed limit, and whether or not the location is identified in the transportation plan.
Council discussed the budget amendment.
Well, I appreciate that staff is expected to begin working on prioritizing upgrades to crosswalks. That prioritization work is not complete. And lacking prioritization, I am asking council to act.
To identify one spot in the city above all others, I think jeopardizes this work that we're trying to do uniformly across our city.
It is really excellent to have staff prioritize. because they see things much more broadly than I do. And I really trust, I really trust staff's prioritization. I think we're going to need to do some hard thinking about what we're willing to give up in order to accomplish very well some of the basic crucial things that we believe people deserve in the city.
In a split vote, with only 2 council members voting in support, the funding for upgrading crosswalks on Stone School Road was defeated. After amendments, the budget was approved unanimously. The meeting ended at approximately 10 p.m. without any further public comment. For more details about this meeting, visit A2Council.com.
Welcome to this week's A2Council Moment of Zen.
I'm not clear on the process for approving the budget. Are we voting on the amendments and you're then going to incorporate all of that into the budget, or are we assuming that the budget's already passed and you're just...
The budget has not yet, these amendments are incorporated into the budget. The budget has not yet been, the budget has been moved and seconded. It has not yet been passed. These are amendments proposed to the budget. When they run their course up and down, the budget will have been modified by the amendments that have been approved.
Okay.